Chapter 2. Sayyid Kazim Reshti. The news of the passing away of Shaykh Ahmad greatly distressed Sayyid Kazim, but at the same time strengthened his resolve to carry on the work of his beloved teacher with renewed vigor. But without the protection of Shaykh Ahmad, Sayyid Kazim found himself to be the target of malicious attacks of those who were jealous of him and of his position. His name was hated by them, and they scorned his teachings. Sayyid Kazim was beginning to despair of being able to control the disciples of Shaykh Ahmad when he conceived of a plan which would restore his influence over the people. This was to get support of one Haji, Sayyid Muhammad Reshti, one of the most learned priests in Iran, and whose authority extended far beyond the city of Isfahan where he lived. He exhorted his youthful disciple Mullah Hussein Bashuri, who was later given the title Abu Bol Bab, Gate of the Gate, by the Bab, as the Bab's first believer, to arise and leave for Isfahan and find out from the learned dignitary as to what was the reason for his sudden aloofness from the disciples of Shaykh Ahmad, whereas previously he was so considerate toward Shaykh Ahmad and showed him such affection. If Sayyid Muhammad had any doubts, they should be removed by Mullah Hussein, and he should try to get testimony from Sayyid Muhammad to the effect that he considered the teachings of Shaykh Ahmad to be truthful and sound. After Isfahan, he asked Mullah Hussein to visit Mirza Askari in Mashhad, the foremost priest in the holy city, and get a similar pronouncement from him. Mullah Hussein immediately arose to fulfill this task and proceeded to Isfahan. On his arrival in that city, though tired and dust-laden, he made his way to the presence of Sayyid Muhammad and found him in the company of his vast and richly clothed company of disciples. Undeterred by the assemblage in which he found himself, Mullah Hussein proceeded to the place where the learned Sayyid Muhammad sat, and with extreme politeness and courtesy he explained to him the purpose of his visit. To this the Sayyid replied that in the beginning he believed that Shaykh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim were completely selfless in their desire to serve the faith, and consequently he had extended his wholehearted support. But lately he had found a great number of mysterious references in their writings which he could not understand, and therefore thought it wise to keep silent for a while. Mullah Hussein requested him then and there to show him which passages in their writings were incomprehensible. The learned Sayyid Muhammad, obligated by sending for the writings and show the portions which require explanation. Mullah Hussein proceeded to give his commentary on these passages in the most lucid and convincing manner, and with such enthusiasm that the Sayyid Muhammad was moved to tears. For 2 days, Mullah Hussein continued to indicate the truth of the teachings of Shaykh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim, till Sayyid Muhammad publicly proclaimed as well as give in writings that he was thoroughly convinced about the writings of Shaykh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim, and whosoever deviated from their path had turned aside from the faith of the Prophet Muhammad himself. With this declaration in his hand, Mullah Hussein left Isfahan, after refusing to accept any money from Sayyid Muhammad for all the trouble he took. At this time, Sayyid Kazim became aware that the appearance of the Promised One was very close at hand. He therefore exerted his utmost endeavor to remove the barriers that might stand in the way of the recognition of this treasure of God. He even hinted at his presence in their very midst, saying, "You behold him with your eyes, and yet recognize him not." Regarding the signs of the manifestation, he said, "He is of noble lineage. He is descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, of the family of Hashim. He is young in age and is possessed of innate knowledge. His learning is derived not from the teachings of Shaykh Ahmad, but from God. My knowledge is but a drop compared with the immensity of his knowledge. My attainments a speck of dust in the face of the wonders of his grace and power. Nay, immeasurable is the difference. He is of medium height, abstains from smoking, and is of extreme devoutness and piety." Some amongst his disciples felt that all these attributes could be found in Sayyid Kazim, but Sayyid Kazim was sorely displeased at the suggestion and displayed any such station for himself. In some of his works, he even alluded to the blessed name of Baha'u'llah in veiled language. Sayyid Kazim suffered grievously at the hands of opponents, silently and heroically. The wayward people would heap all kinds of indignities upon him. This reached its culmination in the year 1843 AD, when Sayyid Kazim's notorious enemy, Sayyid Ibrahim, got together a band of conniving and plotting colleagues and arose the populace against Sayyid Kazim, thus endangering his life. They even succeeded in evicting the official representative of the Ottoman government from Karbala and pocketed all the revenue due to him for their own evil and rebellious purposes. The government of Constantinople promptly dispatched a military official with the backing of an army to quench the agitation in Karbala. Sayyid Kazim tried to pacify the populace into obeying the military commander, and his words seemed to have some effect on the rebels. But the leaders of the band persuaded them once again to arise and wage holy war against the army, and told them they would be successful. The military commander sent word that if by morning he did not have the surrender of the ringleaders, he would storm the city, and the only place where refuge could be taken would be in the home of Sayyid Kazim. The headless people did not respond, and in the morning the army bombarded the gates of the city, completely overrunning the town and massacred a considerable number of population. They did not spare even those taking shelter in the holy shrines of Imam Hussein and of that of Abbas. The only refuge where people could be saved was in the home of Sayyid Kazim, which was so filled to capacity that 22 persons were found trampled to death. This memorable event occurred on January 10, 1843. The story related by one of the disciples, Shaykh Hassan Sunasi, needs to be recounted at this juncture. While all these controversies were raging around Sayyid Kazim during these painful years, one early morning Shaykh Hassan was woken and taken by Sayyid Kazim to a house, at the door of which was standing a youth whose countenance showed an expression of humility and kindness. He wore a green turban, showing himself to be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. He showed great love to Sayyid Kazim, but the complete humility and reverence which Sayyid Kazim bore towards this youth, a reverence which even the shrine of Imam Hussein failed to excite, took Shaykh Hassan by surprise. The youth took them inside the house, bade them be seated, and offered a drink in a silver cup to Sayyid Kazim, reciting a line from the Quran, chapter 76, verse 21. Quote from the Quran: "A drink of pure beverage shall their Lord give them." Shaykh Hassan too was given the same drink, but all that was spoken was this line from the Quran. After some time they took their leave. 3 days later, this same youth came where the disciples of Sayyid Kazim were assembled. He sat for some time listening to Sayyid Kazim, but as the latter's eyes fell on him, he stopped his speech and turned to the youth. He said to his disciples, "What more shall I say? Lo, the truth is more manifest than the ray of light that has fallen upon that lap." Sayyid Kazim, despite repeated appeals and requests refused to divulge the name of the promised one. Shaykh Hassan made inquiries about the youth and found that he was an extremely worthy person, but every time he wished to approach him, some power restrained him from speaking to the youth. After some time, he was told that the youth had left for Shiraz, and shortly after that, he heard of the call of the young men from Shiraz. He promptly left Karbila to follow his heart's desire in Shiraz, but was disappointed to find that the object of his quest had leapt to Mecca and Medina. He waited till the Bab returned, and from then on remained in close association with him and engaged him in transcribing the verses dictated by the Bab. Later the Bab sent Shaykh Hassan to Karbila to remain there till he beheld with his own eyes the promised Hussein, the new manifestation of God. And when he did, he should convey to him the expression of the Bab's loving devotion. Shaykh Hassan lived in Karbila for 2 years, and in the year 1851, while praying one day at the shrine of Imam Hussein, Shaykh Hassan for the first time saw Baha'u'llah. To describe him in Shaykh Hassan's words, he said, quote, "The beauty of that face, those exquisite features which no pen or brush dare describe, his penetrating glance, his kindly face, the majesty of his bearing, the sweetness of his smile, the luxuriance of his jet black flowing locks, left indelible impression upon my soul. I was then an old man, bowed with age. He took my hand and said, quote, 'Praise be to God that you have remained in Karbila and have beheld with your own eyes the countenance of the promised Hussein.'" End of quote. I recall instantly the promise given to me by the Bab. Shaykh Hassan wanted to proclaim the news of the advance of the promised Hussein to all the world, but he was restrained by Baha'u'llah, who told him, "The hour is approaching, but not yet come." Sayyid Kazim was himself surrounded by many vain and selfish hypocrites who professed to be devoted to him, but there were a few whose devotion to him was unquestionable and who had understood his teachings. Among them was one, Shaykh Abdurrab, who was one of his leading disciples. He married Mullah Hussein's sister. Shaykh Abu Turab was witness one day when the servant of Haji Mirza Karim Khan, a self-opinionated, faithless disciple, brought a book to Sayyid Kazim, asking Sayyid Kazim to read it and give in writing his approval of the contents. Sayyid Kazim glanced through it, returned it, and said, quote, "Tell your master that he better than anyone else can estimate the value of his own book." End of quote. After the servant left, Sayyid Kazim told Shaykh Abu Turab that Haji Mirza Karim Khan was trying to undo all that Sayyid Kazim had endeavored to do in his lifetime, but that Haji Mirza will live to see all his schemes fraught with failure. He told Sheikh Abdul Turab to conceal this prediction till the day when the promised one appeared, and then to proclaim all that he had heard and seen. Sheikh Abu Turab later accepted the Bab and was imprisoned in the same dungeon of Baha'u'llah in Tehran, and he was eventually martyred. As the days of Sayyid Kazim were drawing to a close, he continued with unabated zeal to teach his disciples to beware lest the world's vanities made them forget their true purpose, which was to seek the promised one. He told them that many of them would find him and in return would have to give up their lives in his path. He also related to them how Shaykh Ahmad had repeatedly told him about the advance of those twin revelations, which are to follow one another in rapid succession. Shaykh Ahmad had also mentioned to Sayyid Kazim that neither of them will live to gaze upon their effulgent glory. He described how great was the cause and begged God to assist the disciples in their tests and trials, which were bound to come. Every year, Sayyid Kazim was in the habit of going from Karbala to Qasimain, the town where the 7th and 9th Imams are buried. In the year 1843, in the month of December, he went as usual to Qasimain, and en route stopped for prayer at the Masjid Barasha. As he finished his prayer, an Arab shepherd came up to him, lovingly embraced him, and recited the following story. 3 days ago, he said, I was shepherding my flock in the adjoining pasture, when sleep suddenly fell upon me. In my dream, I saw Muhammad, the apostle of God, who addressed me in these words, quote, Give ear, O shepherd, to my words, and treasure them within your heart, for these words of mine are the trust of God, which I commit to your keeping. If you be faithful to them, great will be your reward. If you neglect them, grievous retribution will befall you. Hear me, this is the truth with which I charge you. Stay within the precincts of the Masjid Buratha on the 3rd day after this dream. A Zion of my house, Sayyid Kazim by name, will accompany by his friends and companions alight at that hour of noon beneath the shadow of the palm in the vicinity of the masjid. There he will offer his prayer. As soon as your eyes fall upon him, seek his presence and convey to him my loving greetings. Tell him from me, rejoice, for the hour of your departure is at hand. when you shall have performed your visit in Kazim and shall have returned to Karbila, there, 3 days after your return, you will wing your flight to me. Soon after shall he who is the truth be made manifest. Then shall the world be illumined by the light of his face. End of quote. Sayyid Kazim's face burst into a smile when he heard the dream. His companions were grieved, but he told them not to be sad, as only after he died would the promised one be revealed, and surely they were all waiting for that event. This story was noised abroad, and many testified to its veracity. But still, when the promised day came, how many of these who heard this dream with their own ears rejected the truth? Sayyid Kazim returned to Karbila, and on the same day fell sick. On the 3rd day, at the age of 60, in accordance with the dream of the Arab shepherd, Sayyid Kazim passed away. His remains were buried in the precincts of the shrine of Imam Hussein.